Bandwidth for this podcast is brought to you by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
Welcome back to MacBreak Studio. I'm here in the studio with Steve. My name's Mark. We're talking Final Cut Pro 10, and what are we doing today?
Well, I thought we'd do part 2 of some secondary color correction I showed a few episodes back, which we took a shot of a helicopter in the sky, and we used the color range or color selection eyedropper in the color board to change the color of the sky.
Oh, the sky, right.
We were selecting a color that time.
Yes.
And in this particular episode, we're going to use a mask. Now, a mask is a very important tool to people who are color grading because it isolates specific portions of the frame to your color grade, so you can only affect certain areas.
So it's a specific area, basically, of space that you want to affect.
It's a mask, and you basically have two shapes in Final Cut Pro 10. You have a circle and well, actually more. You can oval and a square.
Because you can kind of morph them a little bit.
But look, you're not going to do complex shapes like you could in DaVinci, but for things like headshots, interviews, where you want to effectively digitally relight and add some brightness to the subject,
it's perfect for that.
It's perfect for that.
So
I thought we'd take a look. So here we are in Final Cut Pro. I have this shot of this attractive woman, and the background is a little bit bright for me. I'd like to put a little bit more focus on her and less on the background.
So it's because bright things are distracting, and I want to look at those lights and the screens and stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. So what I'm going to do is start by selecting the clip. And in the inspector, I have the inspector open. You'll see that I have a correction one that's default applied to the clip, but I haven't done anything yet.
There's no correction there. It's just to let you choose it if you want.
So you have essentially these two masks buttons here. The last one we looked at was the color mask. Now we're going to look at the shape mask, which is, so I'm just click. And you get controls over the viewer and allows you to move the mask where you want. And what's nice about this particular mask is that you can essentially shape it to fit the face. It's really great for faces.
Great for faces,
Great for
make
faces.
It more oval, change the size of it.
And the first thing, well, before I start manipulating the actual feathering of the mask, which is controlled by this outer line. This controls the feathering. These dots control the shape, and you can even rotate it. But that's all I really need for this particular subject. I find that the mask itself is better served with a lot of shadows, so that you don't have this harsh transition from light to dark.
A lot of feathering.
A lot of feathering makes so. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of open this up a little bit, and now I'm going to jump into the color board by clicking this little arrow here and jump to the color board, and I immediately want to jump to the exposure controls. Right? And just so you can see how this works, I'm just going to drag the global control all the way down, and you can see by default it works inside the mask by default, and that's certainly not what we want.
Kind of the opposite of what we want.
Right. So to change that, and you saw this a few Mac breaks back, is that we can choose to manipulate inside the mask or outside the mask using these buttons down here. So I'm going to go ahead and click outside. And now when I use the global control, notice it's only affecting the outside the mask. Okay. So I'm going to reset this. By the way, reset is select the target and press delete. It'll reset.
Yeah, that's not very intuitive.
No, it's not.
Click on the target. And you can't even tell the target's really selected when you click on it.
No, well, injecting a drive by dragging it to the trash can is not exactly intuitive either. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just bring down the midtones a little bit here. I'm going to just grab this midtones slider. I'm just going to just darken the overall.
Rather than the global.
Rather than global. I don't like doing global. I like working in the separate shadows, mids, and highlights.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is just kind of drag this down a little bit, just darken, and the highlights probably need to come down. Got a lot of highlight here, so I'm going to just kind of bring this down. Color correction is a lot of times about just subtlety. You don't want to go too far. Just a little bit is all that's really necessary. But you can see already that it's like I'm putting like a spotlight on her.
Yes.
Okay. In the DaVinci world, they would call this a power window. But essentially, I'm putting more emphasis now on her face. I'm essentially like digitally relighting her with these controls. So I, again, don't want to go too far, but just so we can see a before and after, I'm just going to come up here and just going to toggle. So you get this little toggle here.
Would turning off the correction do the same thing?
Yeah. Actually, that would do the same thing.
Okay.
So yeah, they would just, you can see.
So you can definitely see a slight difference, but it definitely brings more attention to her face.
Right, and I really find that I use this mask a lot for this purpose, where I have the subject and there's just too much emphasis on the background.
Yes, it's great, and it's so subtle you don't see any kind of fall off, any kind of line between her face and the rest of it.
And that was the key. The key to that, Mark, was making sure that that you had the feathering, right? Exactly.
And not being too dramatic on your change as well, right?
That's exactly right. You want to make sure that you have a lot of feathering between the mask. Other thing that you could do with mask is, well, in this case, the subject isn't moving.
Yeah. So
but sometimes the subject is moving. In this case, the subject isn't really moving. The camera's moving.
Yeah.
Either way, the subject is moving.
And where they are on the frame changes.
Right. So you can animate these masks. So I'm going to select this, and let me go ahead. I already have a shape mask. I'm just going to delete that. I'm going to select. I'm going to go ahead and add a new shape mask. Go ahead and throw it over here, and I'm just going to be rough with this here, and go ahead and again make the feathering fairly wide. And I'm going to jump into the color board, and I'm going to exposure. I'm just going to start darkening some of the back.
And then switch it to outside again.
Switch it to outside. Thank you. Switch it to outside. Actually, let me make sure I reset the inside first. Go to outside.
Because you can actually make changes on both inside and outside.
You can. You can do inside and outside. Absolutely.
It's not one or the other. That's great.
Right. So now, make it a little bit darker off this
a little more vignette kind of thing.
A little bit more vignette. I'm going to go ahead and expand the shadow out a little bit more.
The feathering?
The feathering. Sorry. Feathering. But see...
Yeah, it moves out of the way. That's no good.
So what we want to do is essentially keyframe this. And you'll do that back in the inspector. If I go in here, you'll notice by shape max...
you can set keyframes.
Keyframe. So I'm going to go ahead and click Add a Keyframe. Okay, then I'm going to move... and I learned this from you. But you want to go ahead and move it kind of a farther extreme, and then
wherever that camera move stops, maybe.
Yeah, and I don't know if when it stops way over here, somewhere over here, but I'm not going to go way over. What the heck? I'll just grab this and just move this, and by virtue of the fact that I set the first keyframe and move the playhead,
that'll be setting another keyframe.
Final Cut Pro automatically knew to set a keyframe, but as I scrub through, you'll notice that it doesn't. Well, it's tracking with it pretty good.
Well. There,
right there, a little off. So I just move the playhead.
Move it over.
And then just move it over. And Final Cut Pro will actually figure out, right there, it's like, should figure out.
So you're kind of splitting the difference each time, going between the existing keyframes.
Yeah. So
nice. And now it's tracking. And it doesn't need to be perfect, right?
Just doesn't need to be perfect.
It's a subtle effect.
It's a subtle effect.
But just trying to keep it
notice all I'm doing is moving the playhead and moving the mask, and it's setting a keyframe for every single.
And now when you go through, it's tracking.
It's tracking.
Plenty close for what you're trying to do there.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
Yeah. So. Again, really nice way to use masks. I use it all the time for interviews, subjects where I want to essentially relight them, de-emphasize the background, and now you can see you can animate the mask if the camera or the subject is moving.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah. RippleTraining.com for all kinds of tutorials and plugins for Final Cut Pro 10 and related applications. And thank you for watching MacBreak Studio.